Hi, this is Brian with ActiveMelody.com. In this week's guitar lesson, we have a really cool Tex Mex style rock blues rhythm lead thing. There's a rhythm component to this in the first video. There's a lead component in the second video. And we're going to tie all this back to some basic chord shapes that you already know so that you can take these licks and apply them to other things that you're playing. So I've got the lesson split into two parts. In this video, we'll take a look at the first half, which is the rhythm part. If you want to watch the second half, and download the MP3 jam tracks, which I have in multiple tempos, and get the tablature for this, you can get all of those things by going to ActiveMelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP326. Alright, so when I was creating the lesson for this week, I was really shooting for a Mexican-style blues thing. Now, I didn't want to go full-on Mexican music with accordions and all of that, or even a waltz. But I was shooting for kind of like the Los Lobos sound, or maybe even something that you might hear from the Fabulous Thunderbirds, kind of that rock blues with a Mexican influence. But when I played it back, actually we have somebody working on our house, and he was just walking through, and I said, "Hey man, come take a listen to this. Like, what style would you say this is?" And he listens to it, and he's like, "Sounds like surf." And then I played it for somebody else, and they said, "Well, it's more like a rockabilly kind of thing." So I don't know. This is sort of my attempt at trying to sound like, you know, a Tex Mex blues thing. And I know some of you are purists out there, and you're going to tell me all the reasons why it's not, and you're probably right. But anyway, I wanted to throw in some Mexican style blues licks into a composition so that you can use these in your own playing. It really does enhance what you do, and it works over country or blues or rock. And this stuff is really not that hard to play. We'll connect it back to basic things you already know. So that's what we're going to be shooting for. Now, the song is played in the key of E, and it goes from the 5 chord to the 1 chord. So we actually start, even though the song is in the key of E, we're starting on the B chord, and then we resolve to the 1 chord. And that's a common scenario that you hear in a lot of Mexican music. 5 chord to the 1 chord, back and forth, and I love playing over the 5 chord to the 1 chord because it's so much fun. It's endless. You can just keep coming up with ideas, and so that's what we're going to do. There's one other chord in this. There's an A chord, which would be your 4 chord, in one place, but that's it. Those are the 3 chords we're going to be playing over. All right, so how do we start this thing? Well, it starts in that B7 chord, and the way that I played it goes like this. Now that's hybrid pick, so I'm picking on the 5th string, and then I'm using my ring finger to pluck the 2nd string and the 3rd string. Now you don't have to do that. You could just use your pick on both of those strings, but it's a lot easier if you get into hybrid picking. It'll serve you well if you learn how to do that. So starts with a walk up to the 2nd fret 5th string, which would be your B note. Now I'm starting with the open 5th string, which is the A. Go to A sharp, and then make sure you're using your middle finger to play the 2nd fret 5th string so that your other fingers can fall into place to make that B7 chord. So you know how to make that chord. So after we get to that, my ring finger is going to come up and pluck the 2nd string, which is an open B string. We go back to the 5th string with the pick, and then my ring finger plays the 3rd string out of this chord. So all together you have, and then we repeat it. So that's what that B7 chord sounds like. Now I'm using a little bit of overdrive, but not a whole lot. You know, if I hit the strings kind of heavy, you can hear it break up, but if I play it softly, it sounds very clean. I'm using the Kemper Profiler, and I have a matchless amp that I'm using. It's a profiled amp. I don't own a matchless, but that's one that I found somewhere online. So we have, and then we go to the 1 chord, which is the E, which goes. And for that, I'm just making an E chord. I'm starting by hitting the open E string, the 6th string, and then I can come up and hit the 1 string. Both of those are E notes, so you have. Now I'm adding my pinky to the 2nd fret 2nd string, so you have. And you can see I'm playing 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Those are the string numbers, so you have. All right, so backing up from the beginning. Okay, now Now, then the song goes back to the 5 chord, which is the B chord, but I didn't play a B, I played this. Now let me show you how to play it, and then I'll show you kind of what it is and how to think about it. So I'm using my pinky just because I was already in this chord shape here from this E. So I let my pinky slide from that 2nd fret 2nd string up to the 5th fret 2nd string. And what giving it that sound, that big fat sound, is playing the 2nd string and the open 1 string, which is your E string. Now even though we're playing this over the B7 chord, which is your 5 chord, it's okay to let those E strings ring out because the song is in the key of E. So in this case, we're playing not necessarily over the chord change per se, but we're just staying in the key of the song. So we have, so it's 1, 2, 3, down, up, down with the right hand. Now notice that my pinky slid from the 5th fret to the 4th fret. And I'm still playing down, up, down, playing strings 2 and 1. Now, if you don't want to use your pinky, if you want to use your ring finger, it's probably a better finger to use there. I just found myself using my pinky because of the previous chord I was using it in. Then we come down to the 2nd fret. And then we take the fingers off and play strings 1 and 2 open. So all together you have... And then watch this. That's a downstroke, a hammer on to the 2nd fret 2nd string, and then a slide up to the 4th fret 2nd string, which is a note we've already played. So again, you're always letting that E note, that high E note, drone out with it. So you have... And then we come down back to the 2nd fret. And then I come down to the 1st fret 3rd string. Now why that note? Well, that note is in the E chord. Right? So all of that first part was played over the B7, but then we come down to where the E chord is. So I can just play strings 2 and 3 out of the E chord. Think of it that way. Alright, so let me back it up and play from the beginning up to that point, and then I'll explain what this lick is that we just learned with the open E string there. So we have... So that's how it sounds so far. Now what is this? All that is the major scale. It's the E major scale. Remember, you don't always have to change scales to match the chords. If you're doing that, you're playing the chord changes. But in this case, we're just staying in the key of the song. So I know the song's in the key of E, so that means I can just play the E major scale no matter what chord is going on, and it's going to work. So I'm just, listen to the notes. Those are notes in the E major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. But I'm throwing in that high E string with it, which gives it a little more flavor. So you can remember that going forward. If you like the sound of playing a note and then having that E string ring out, you can do that anytime you're playing something in the key of E. You can always come up here and grab that. It works great from blues. You know, you can use it in all kinds of things. And I hear Jimmy Vaughn using that a lot, doing those kinds of licks. So then the song goes back to the B chord, and what I played was, and all I was doing was literally just playing the B chord. I was playing a B triad, where I bar the first 2 strings on the 7th fret, and then my middle finger's on the 8th fret 3rd string. The other way you could think about that is your B bar chord. If you were to bar here on the 7th fret, play the full bar chord. We don't need the full bar chord, we just need the top 3 strings out of it, a little triad there. But I started that 2 frets below, so I started it here, which would be an A, and slid into that. Now why does that work? Well, I don't really know off the top of my head. I could sit down and like analyze it, but I know that I use that a lot. If I'm going into, let's say we're going into the E chord, you could take that E triad and take that 2 steps below, or 2 frets below, and come up to it. And so you can always kind of use that technique if you're playing a chord, to slide into those chords. Don't just start on the chord, start 2 frets below it, and then work your way up. Try it out. You'd be surprised at how often that technique works. Most of the time. Okay, so for the B part, then I went, and this is again, it kind of got that Mexican feel where you've got the harmonized six. I hear a lot of that in Mexican music. And so what I'm doing there is I'm coming up here to the 9th fret, strings 1 and 3, both fingers in the same fret, and then I quickly slide up to the 11th fret, strings 1 and 3. Now I'm hybrid picking, so I'm picking that on the 3rd string and using my ring finger to pluck the 1st string. So I'm coming up to that position. Now what is this? Well, remember, we're playing over the B chord. So you got your B chord, there's your B triad that we just played. If I were to play the B triad up here, it would look like that. Now that's the D chord shape, it's not a D chord. But if you took your D chord in first position, slid it up here, you'd be playing a B chord. Now all I'm playing is strings 1 and 3 out of that, which is a harmonized 6. Now you can get so much mileage out of knowing where this harmonized 6 is in reference to this chord. I use this all the time, and if you've been following my lessons, you're probably really getting sick of this because it's just part of the way that I think to improvise. But if I'm playing over B, I've got all these Steve Cropper style licks, and then I can go down to that A that I started with, see? So look at all that I have here that works off that B chord. I could use any of that when I'm improvising, and they're all just 2 frets apart if you're looking at the 1st string. So you should become familiar with this chord shape and these harmonized 6 that live off of that chord shape. And you could keep going in either direction, but you've got all this stuff. You've got the blues, all the way down to your 4 chord, and so forth and so on. But anyway, that's what I'm playing over the B. And then I came down to here, which is strings 1 and 3 on the 4th fret. Now what is that? Well, this is where the song goes to the E chord. So look at this. I'm doing the same thing that I did up here, but I'm doing it down here. So remember, I showed you if you took your bar and then you come up here, you can play that harmonized 6. Well, think of this as the same thing. There's my bar, it's the nut. So there's my E chord, and then there's the E, or the harmonized 6 with the 1 and the 3 string. There's my E chord using the D chord shape. So hopefully that's sort of connected in your mind. Now you've got the same thing down here for E. So you could really spend a lot, even if I didn't cover anything else in this entire composition, you could take just that little nugget of information and put on the jam track, and you could play over each chord. And start to figure out all the stuff you can do with harmonized 6 just by visualizing those chord shapes and working those harmonized 6 around the neck. Let me back up. I like to just keep kind of going from the beginning and playing up to where we are. It just helps to cement things in our minds here. So from the beginning. And then after that I went so we're playing over the E chord. So I went ahead and slid down to the 2nd fret, and then the open E string, played the E chord. And then the song goes to the 4 chord, which is your A. And what I played for that was an A6 chord. So I'm just playing a triad here, the top 3 strings on the 2nd fret. That's a fancier way of playing an A chord, you can think of it that way. You just get a different sound, a different tonality if you play a 6 chord. And so that's just a real easy chord to play because you're just barring 3 strings there. So it's the 2nd fret, and And then it goes to the 5 chord. Well, you know that your 5 chord is always just 2 frets higher than your 4 chord. So whatever you're doing for your 4 chord, if you're playing your A here, you can slide it up and play your 5 chord. Same is true with this 6 chord. So I'm using that as my B 6 chord. So you have, notice that muted strum in there too. I didn't mention that. There's a muted strum, down, down, up. And then we're going to do the same thing. Then I came up here with my pinky and I grabbed the 7th fret 1st string. Now that's just that's a B note. And so you can think of that in the caged system. I did a lesson which was EP326. And I talk about splitting some of those chords into different pieces. And so I think of this as the top part of the G chord. So if you look at your G chord, there's my nut, which is my bar. If I were to slide that up here, I'm just playing the top 3 strings out. Instead of trying to make the full G chord using all 6 strings, which nobody would do out of caged, you do see that quite a bit. And so that's what I'm doing there. And then to the E. And that is really all there is to that first part. Now, if you're a premium member, you have access to the jam track, which I have in multiple tempos. And that's really the best way to practice this. So I don't know what you're waiting for if you're not a premium member. It's an awesome deal, and I put out lessons like this every week, and I've been doing it for many years. I'm going to back up and play through this one more time, and then I'll see you in part 2. And by the way, if you haven't liked or subscribed to my Active Melody channel, make sure you do that, and then click that little alert bell. That's an important piece, just because that's the way that you can automatically be notified when I put out new videos. Okay, so we'll back up, play through it one more time, and then we'll see in part 2. Here we go.